As a soldier, your duty is to train for war. To do so, we must have access to realistic training grounds, which most often are our own training areas. But our training can also be lethal to the environment. Among our tasks as Canadian soldiers, we are more and more often called upon to take part in other military roles, such as peacekeeping operations. In this context, training in a natural environment is essential to the pursuit of our activities. But the occasional abuse of natural resources threatens the integrity of our training grounds, as well as mobilizing public opinion against our activities. As a result, we must minimize damage in order to maximize the use of our training grounds.
Sometimes we wonder what the Army expects of us, to train hard or protect the environment. But when you think about it, it's not complicated. We just need to protect what we have, to make sure that our training grounds remain in a satisfactory condition for our present and future needs.
Our training grounds are irreplaceable. In order to preserve them, the Department of National Defence and Land Force Command have committed to managing our natural resources with the greatest respect for the environment. In doing so, they support the Canadian government's commitment to become a leading force in environmental protection. Air, water, and earth are three elements essential to life. Along with light, they make up a physical environment which is both rich and fragile and permits animals and vegetal species to thrive. The modification or absence of just one of these elements can shatter the ecosystem's balance and endanger the survival of several species.
Some training accidents, like fuel spills, can cause serious damage to many life forms, including our own. All precautions must be taken to prevent environmental damage.
A training ground is a vital tool in the same way as a personal weapon or a service vehicle. It must be maintained in perfect working order. This long-term vision is now an integral part of our mission. To achieve its objectives, Land Force Command has put in place a strategy based on two principles: compliance, which means making sure that we stay out of jail, and prevention of environmental damage, a policy that will ensure the preservation of our training grounds for future use. Canada has enacted a large number of laws and regulations that govern the use of the environment. Land Force Command is obliged to comply with all of them. The Fisheries Act is the law we are most likely to infringe. Its purpose is to preserve fish and their habitat, including shorelines, wetlands, and creeks. The Canadian Environmental Protection Act brings together several laws that regulate toxic products throughout their life cycles. The Canadian Environmental Assessment Act requires environmental impacts to be studied and evaluated before a project or activity is undertaken. The Hazardous Materials Law governs the use and identification of dangerous materials.
The intent of these laws is easily summarized. Don't mess up any water bodies. Be careful with dangerous substances, and make a plan that will lessen the effect of your activity.
As professional soldiers, we are responsible for our acts and must comply with these laws at all times. The environmental and operational staff of Land Force Command have analyzed these laws and incorporated them into day-to-day procedures. The results of this operation have been incorporated into the standard operating procedures, standing orders, instructions, and training plans. A leader's guide dealing with the environmental aspects of our activities has also been produced. In addition, tools such as the Environmental Baseline Study, EBS, have been prepared for the existing bases and training areas in order to permit responsible planning of training activities.
The Army has several specialists on hand to ensure we can train while respecting the law. We don't have to be specialists. However, it is our responsibility to respect the SOPs. And when in doubt, ask.
Environmental laws concern all Canadians without exception. They stipulate that you are personally responsible for protecting the environment while performing your duties. It won't do any good to play dumb. If an environmental accident occurs because of your actions or omissions, the onus will be on you to prove that you took all reasonable precautions to protect the environment. After the inquest, accusations may be laid under civil or military jurisdiction.
In the event of a conviction, you could be ordered to pay heavy penalties or even sentenced to a term in prison. Make sure you always respect environmental regulations. Respecting natural habitats is your personal responsibility. The law doesn't tell you to pick up your garbage. It's a question of common sense.
What the regulations do not stipulate falls into the realm of environmental common sense. Make sure that your activities leave as little trace as possible. Picking up the garbage, disposing of it properly, and respecting the flora and fauna are all actions that will be appreciated by the next users. Think of your buddies in the next unit. If we are to train for war, we must have grounds to train on, and preventing pollution is the key to sustainable training. Specific training activities have a direct impact on the environment. Here is an overview of the most common damages and the mitigation procedures normally applicable. Petroleum, oils, and lubricants. Of course, the Army cannot function without POLs, but these products represent a serious threat to the environment. A single liter of oil can contaminate 2 million liters of water. Like all chemical and industrial products, they must be handled with the greatest care. Never dump POLs on the ground or in waterways. Dispose of used oils in authorized recuperation drums. Never refuel near waterways. Use ground sheets when working on vehicles or do it on hard stands. In the event of a spill, be prepared to apply the stipulated procedure in order to prevent an infiltration of the contaminant into the soil or water. The reaction sequence is the following: contain the spill, report it, clean it up. Tanks and other tracked vehicles permit easy movement over obstacles, but they give vegetation a rough time. To minimize the impact, you need to conduct hard vehicle movement during tactical moves and only when necessary. Follow existing paths where possible, and avoid driving over vegetation unless part of a tactical trace or scenario. Tanks are capable of rapid J-turn pivots. Although tactically efficient, this maneuver rips up everything in its path. These turns are only to be executed when absolutely necessary and only in authorized locations. Building defenses is essential to training. Only dig in authorized locations and always refill and compact all excavation before leaving the training area.
Remember that it's possible to limit damage by removing dirt in layers and replacing it with topsoil last. Once again, good preparation yields the best results.
Military vehicles fording waterways constitute a serious environmental impact. The destruction of shorelines and vegetation, soil erosion, and ensuing sedimentation affect the natural habitat of fish and other inhabitants. The prevention of irreparable damages simply requires crossing only at locations authorized by the training plan. Some training grounds have built artificial reservoirs that permit training without environmental impact. Elsewhere, efforts have been made to minimize the damage, such as concrete access ramps. If available, always give these sites top priority. Our activities can disrupt the habitats of marine life and the quality of waterways. As a rule of thumb, remember to never interfere with the flow of a waterway. Bird sanctuaries, nesting habitats, livestock habitats, historical sites and cemeteries are in close proximity to our training grounds. These fragile sites are clearly marked off-limits. Damage to such protected areas may have very negative consequences environmentally, culturally, and politically. These are off-limits at all times. During recent years, public opinion has developed an increasingly powerful voice in Canadian politics. The population has clearly demonstrated its desire for sound environmental management.
Our actions must respect this desire and avoid affecting the quality of life of our neighbors.
In the same vein, noise pollution can constitute a major irritant. Noise also affects wild animals, farm animals, and civilian populations that live in proximity to our training grounds. Good planning can considerably reduce negative impacts. It will take into account the location of the training ground, the proximity of sensitive zones, the period of the year, and civilian activities. Dumping wastewaters into natural settings can have devastating effects on soil, flora, and fauna. Waters from the kitchen, shower, and laundry must be collected in watertight containers and then treated by specialists.
Our SOPs, when followed, will minimize the negative impacts.
Of course, garbage and litter have a negative effect on the environment. Garbage also attracts wildlife and may give away your position to the enemy. Use all possible means to adequately dispose of your waste.
The principle is very simple. Don't leave behind any trace of your passage. The 4 R's apply as much in our training area as they do at home. So, reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover.
Target practice ranges especially must be thoroughly cleaned after every exercise. In the case of an exercise with guided missiles, do not forget to recover the guide wires. If left on the ground, they can become animal traps. The same applies to communication cables. Pick them up. Remember, the sheer concentration of troops during bivouacs and hides makes this all the more necessary. In an ideal world, we should be able to leave the fauna and flora intact after training. If that is not feasible, it is still possible to minimize negative impacts by not needlessly cutting vegetation. If you need to cut live branches, only do so in locations authorized by the range control officer. As far as possible, make use of nets and sackcloth rather than bushes and vegetation.
A first-class army requires first-class training, in the field and in the garrison. Remember, the environment is not our enemy.
By applying common sense to our training requirements, we can achieve our training missions, minimize the damage to the environment, and increase the longevity of our training areas.